Today I'm going to give a quick introduction to the elements of art. And the elements of art are points, line, shape, form, color, value, space, and texture. Let's start with points. Points are exactly what they sound like. Now, points can be placed around a piece of paper on a canvas, and they can plot out what ends up being a shape. Now, if we return to the Chauvet caves from our cave painting lecture, we can isolate a bear here, and you can see if you drew dots along the lines here, you would end up with a bear shape. Now, if you then took those dots and began to draw a line connecting each of those points, you'd create a shape more like what we find on the final version of the bear on the cave painting. So here we are taking those points and drawing a line through it, and soon enough those points disappear and we end up with a line. Okay, so the line is what you see in the final product, and it is this line that when finished creates the shape of the bear. And so in most cases when you look at a drawing, you're looking at not the points somehow not, they end up disappearing, and you're left with the line, and the line, in the case of this particular drawing, creates the shape of a bear. Now, line doesn't always have to create a shape. Sometimes a line is just a line. If you go back to the Lascaux cave that we looked at in the last lecture, and we looked at the bird-headed man with the bison, you can see that the staff that's piercing the bison, or the spear, or the legs of the man are all just simple lines. Now, one term we're familiar with when we're thinking about art is color. Now, of course, color is vibrant. It comes in different shades and vibrancies. And I'm sure you're familiar with something that's called the color wheel, where you can see you have primary colors, complementary colors, ranging from yellow, orange, red, blue, and all the colors in between. So it's not really hard to kind of wrap our head around the term color. And if you go back to the Lascaux cave, you can see that color was used to create these various animals, from bulls and horses to even the bear that we saw earlier. Now, earlier we talked about it in two different ways, using points and then using a line. And so both cases you could make a shape, but you could also make a shape with just pure color. And so if we imagine that there were no lines here, and we just took our spray paint, our brush, and we began to fill in slowly with paint, we'd create a shape using just color. As you know, color comes in different shades. We don't just have one yellow or one orange or one red. We have different values of that color. And so it's something you probably already know instinctively. But if we were to take a look at a strip of color, we'd take a look at its value, and we can see that it's essentially different shades. In this case, we have what's going from white to pink to darker pink, and eventually to red. All of them are different shades or different values of red that are important for an artist, because these different values end up giving a sense of volume or form to an object, whether it be a drawing or a painting. In the case of this particular cave painting of a bison, we can see clearly the colors that are being used. We have white, black, and red. But if we take a look at that red, it isn't just one consistent red. It's different values of it. In other words, it gets darker to lighter as it gets closer to that white pigment. And what this does is it gives it shape and form. In other words, it looks more three-dimensional than, let's say, that bear that we saw earlier. And if you take a look at the juxtaposition of the bison with an actual photo of a bison, you can see clearly how that artist has really captured the form of that animal by using different values of paint. The same goes for this particular painting of a horse. Here we have a kind of a Mongolian horse with its red coat, and then it gets white as it gets towards the belly. And this indeed, just like the bison before, gives it form as well. And you can see clearly here with a photo of a modern day Mongolian horse that indeed it looks three-dimensional just like the real thing. One of the words I used when talking about the use of value was form. In other words, the use of that red and its changing values gave form to that bison and that Mongolian horse. But it's actually many things that can help create a two-dimensional object, make it look like a three-dimensional object. And that really is, when we're talking about form, what we're talking about. It has this 3D quality to it. And so if you look at this image of geometric forms, the cone, the cube, the sphere, and the cylinder, and you really begin to analyze it, the reason those things look three-dimensional is because they have value. In other words, the darkness on the side of the cube, for instance, versus the other sides, that difference in the value of that pink color of the cube makes it look as if it's three-dimensional. With the sphere, you can see on the bottom, it's a really dark, almost black color. And then as it moves towards the top of that sphere, the values of green change so that it indeed looks like a ball rather than just a circle. The other thing that gives it shape, of course, is the use of lines. So the cone, the cube, the sphere, and the cylinder have different shapes, not only because the value, but also because the use of lines that give these forms their shape. So once we've created a shape using line, points, color, or given it form by using value, the paper or canvas ends up being divided into the space that you haven't touched, the negative space, and the space that you've touched with your pencil or paper, which is the positive. And actually, the best way to kind of understand this is to go back to the cave paintings and look at the painting or the kind of sprayed effect of the hand imprint. And so if we were to go back in time and imagine someone's hand moving across the surface of that cave wall and then spraying the pigment out of their mouth, once they've done that, they would remove their hand and you would end up with a negative and positive space. So the hand would be negative, no paint touched it, and the positive would be the black area around. So the image, right, is divided into two spaces, both positive and negative.